Now I'm accessing the Coupa Supplier Portal. I've created a dummy account for the purpose of this live demonstration. I'm going to go ahead and log in. Perfect. Now you can see that I'm in the home menu of my Coupa Supplier Portal. As soon as I log in, I'm automatically redirected to the Coupa homepage. Before starting to transact with RBI, I need to perform one additional mandatory step, which is to enter my remit-to details. To do so, I'm going to navigate to the Setup tab in the blue bar over here. Once in the Setup tab, you'll see that I have a list of functionalities right here. To configure my remit-to, I will first set up my legal entity. Here you can see I've already created legal entities, but for the purpose of this demo, I'm going to go ahead and create an additional one. Creating the legal entity is critical as this will be associated to the remit-to address. I'm going to create a dummy legal entity name here. So for example, I'm going to select TDL Group Ontario and the applicable countries. I'm going to select Canada here and then hit continue. It'll prompt me to add my QST registration number. For more information, you can click on the information button. I'm going to add a dummy number to proceed. I'm going to hit save and continue. So here it's asking me to select the address from which I want to invoice from. You can check the button use this for the remit-to address and then use for the ship from address. You can uncheck this if your remit-to address is different than your legal entity or if you have more than one remit-to location. Here it'll show you the message as well that it's required for invoicing to enter the registered address of your legal entity. It also gives you a prompt saying that this is the same location where you are to receive your government documents. So here I'm going to add a dummy address. Please note that when you add your tax ID, it has to be in the appropriate format associated to the country or region. So here, if I'm to click Canada, and if I enter a VAT ID here, and if it doesn't match the format, it will trigger an error. But since it does, it had went through. So this is just reconfirming that the details I entered previously are also being used for my remit-to address. I'm going to hit save and continue. Perfect. So now it'll see that this is the legal entity I created, and this is the remit-to address to which I'm sending the payment for the invoices. I'm going to hit next. In addition, it will reconfirm as well that this is the ship from address that was selected. I'm going to hit done, and it'll congratulate me and let me know that now it can be used on new invoices. So I'm going to hit done. To confirm that the remit-to address has been created and was associated to the legal entity, I'm going to navigate to the remit-to tab over here. Here I'll see the address that I had just created associated to the legal entity TDL Group Ontario. In addition, you can add multiple remit-to addresses under one legal entity. For example, if I go into another legal entity, for example, this one, I would see the multiple remit-to addresses that I have associated here. Perfect. So another very useful feature is the Users tab on the top. This is where you can invite users from within your organization by selecting the Invite User button here. You can choose different levels of access you want users within your organization to have. If you have different users for managing invoices, you can deselect or select the Invoices button here. You can choose different permissions accordingly to what you would like that specific user to have. In addition, you can allow them access to certain customers. For this demo, I'm only connected to one customer, Restaurant Brand International. But in your case, if you have multiple customers that you're connecting with on Coupa, you can restrict certain access to the certain users. This helps in managing the tasks amongst yourselves. So once I'm satisfied with the permissions and the customer roles that I have selected, I'm going to submit the first name of the user, their email, and their last name. And then I'm going to send an invitation to give them access. Once you send invitation, they'll receive an email where they can accept or reject the invitation. The next feature I'm going to demonstrate to you is merge requests. The merge request feature here will join the accounts that you submit and give all combined users the ability to invoice and submit payment information linked to customers on behalf of your company. Please make sure that before sending a merge request here, that the email address belongs to a user who is a part of your organization. This is because once a merge request is approved, it cannot be undone. Next, I'm going to discuss any remaining features that may be applicable to you. To do so, I'm going to navigate to the account settings. To access the account settings, hover above your name in the upper right corner. My name associated to the account here is Karen, so when I hover above my name here, I can see account settings and notification preferences. I'm going to go into the account settings. Under the account settings here, you'll see that I can change my personal information here, including my password, my department, and my role. In addition, I can also configure and modify my notification preferences here. The recommendation here would be to turn on notifications for all of the functionalities. That way, when there's an update in any area, you will receive either an email, an SMS, or a portal notification. For example, for an order, let's say you have a new comment on one of the purchase orders sent by RBI. You can also be notified by SMS by checking this box here. You can also be notified by email or via the portal. In addition to notification preferences, you may also enable or disable two-factor authentication by requiring login verification codes for security purposes. Next, I'm going to navigate back into the home page. Near the top and within the blue ribbon, you can see these multiple sub-tabs. We have already discovered the Setup tab, in which I showed you how to configure your remit-to and legal entity, in addition to how to add users and merge requests. The remaining of this session, I'm going to focus on the other two tabs, Orders and Invoices. Now, let's explore the Orders tab. The Orders tab here is where you'll find the POs that have been sent to you by RBI. You can filter out which purchase orders you want to view by selecting the customer here. Since I'm only connected to RBI, I can only view the RBI purchase orders. Here you'll see all the POs that I have issued to me that are required for action. To view the details of a PO, I can click into the PO number here, where it's highlighted in blue. Once I'm in the PO, I can check the Acknowledge button here. This will inform the requester of the PO that I have received the PO and have acknowledged it. If there is any issues seen in the PO details or anything you have questions about, you may leave a comment here on the PO itself and the requester will be notified. In addition, the email address of the requester will be provided on the PO here, so you may contact them directly. However, the comments section is a very quick way of reaching out to the user and keeping all of the communications in one place. Once I hit the acknowledged, if everything looks good on the PO, it'll automatically notify me that it has been acknowledged and the requester will be informed as well. So I'm going to hit save. And move on. So if I would like to invoice a certain purchase order here, for example, if I'm going into this PO right here, I can submit a PO against this purchase order, which is where I'd like to start. So when I scroll to the bottom of a certain PO and I click on Create Invoice, this will take me to the invoice form. So once in the invoice form, it will prompt me to submit the legal entity and remit-to address where I would like the payment to be sent. So for demo, I'm just going to select TDL Group Canada and it'll auto-populate my remit-to and ship from, sorry. I'm going to hit save. Perfect. So now you'll see I'm in the invoice form. When I create an invoice that's backed by a PO document, you'll see a lot of the fields are already populated from the PO. This reduces the need to rekey in the PO details. The only details that are needed to be entered here essentially are the invoice number and the tax information. I'm going to go ahead and type in an invoice number. So for example, if I were to submit test 5, and it'll trigger a check mark if the invoice number is valid. You are not able to reuse the same invoice number. So if I reuse the same invoice number, it'll trigger an error. For example, if I were to do test 4, it'll trigger an error saying that this has already been used. So I'm going to input test 5. Perfect. And it'll let me receipt. And as you can see here, all the to and from addresses are already pre-populated from the purchase order. If I navigate to the line item section here, I can see that the other field that I will need to input is the tax field. Taxes must only be added at the line item level here. They're not able to be added at the header level. While previously tax was estimated on our SAP emailed POs, the tax will not be automatically included on POs from Coupa, and it's the vendor's responsibility to add the tax as applicable at the line item level of the invoice. If you need to add the taxes, please do so at the line item level. So I'm going to navigate to the line section here. And for this line item level, I can select between the tax types here. These are the tax type codes that are specific to RBI. If I select a certain tax type, it will automatically trigger the tax rate and calculate the tax amount. If you're exempt from tax, please select exempt here. This will automatically calculate 0. And for the tax reference, if there's no tax associated, please type in NA here. Perfect. In addition, I'd like to call out that the payment terms here must be submitted based on the RBI requirements and cannot be changed. In addition, before hitting submit, I'd prompt everyone to calculate. What the calculate button does, it'll calculate the new tax totals added plus the net total, so it will give you the proper net total amount here. In this case, since I had inputted exempt from the taxes, it'll calculate 0 for the tax totals. This is a way of recalculating your new total after having added the tax. I'm going to proceed and click submit. When I hit submit, in a scenario where RBI has other policies, a guideline message will pop up with the associated warnings. Here, the associated warning is saying that we're about to create an invoice, and please make sure not to attach any other invoice to this transaction, as the Coupa generated PDF is you and your customer's legal invoice. I can either continue editing the invoice if I've included an attachment that's not associated to this invoice, and if I'd like to remove that. Or I may continue to send the invoice if that's not the case. So you'll see in the second line item, I hadn't filled out the tax, so it will trigger an error. This is because the tax rate must be present on a Canadian compliant invoice here. So I'm just going to select HST here, and I'm going to input the tax reference. Now, when I calculate the new total, it will include the taxes that I had added. And now when I click submit, it will always prompt that same error message. Perfect. Now you can see I've been redirected to the invoice page. Here you can see the invoice that I had just created. Once the invoice is submitted, you can see the status here in the Invoices tab. The status will start at processing, and it will take a couple of seconds to go from processing here to pending approval. Once it's been approved by the RBI requester, the status will be changed to approve, and then finally, once paid, the status will be changed to paid. Perfect. As a next step, you can see the different invoicing options up top. So the one I had just demoed is creating an invoice from a purchase order. However, we can also create a blank invoice. A blank invoice is essentially an invoice that is not backed by a purchase order. So in the top right, if I click this button here, create blank invoice. Again, similar to the PO-backed invoice, it'll prompt me to select my legal entity and my remit-to. And then I'm going to hit save. The process for creating a non-PO is quite similar to the process of creating a PO-backed invoice. The difference you'll see here is that since we do not have a PO to pull details from, you'll need to enter a few more additional fields that weren't required previously. For example, you'll see the following here. We need to enter additional fields such as the ship-to address, the bill-to address, and the requester email and name here. In addition, the buyer tax is going to populate based on the bill-to address selected. To add the ship-to address, you can go ahead and click on the magnifying glass here and select the appropriate address. You can search in the search bar for the title. I'm going to search for TDL Corp Group here, and I'm going to select this one. Next, similar to the ship-to for the bill-to, I'm going to click on the magnifying glass here to select the bill-to. You can search in the bar as well to allocate the specific bill-to. For the purpose of this demo, I'm going to select this one here. You'll see that the buyer tax will be available based on the bill-to address you have selected. So please make sure to include this. For the next step, I will have to add the requester email and name. Email, I'm going to select my email address and my requester name here. Please make sure that the requester email is correct. This step is super critical as the invoice will be going to approval with this requester on the RBI side. Entering the wrong requester email will delay the invoice processing. A similar mandatory field from this invoice and the PO-backed invoice is the invoice number here. I'm going ahead and type in test 6. All the other fields will be populated here. In addition, if required, I can add additional line items here by clicking on the plus icon. This creates another line where I can enter appropriate details. For example, the description of the item, the quantity, the unit of measure, and the price. I'm going to go ahead and fill in the description for my first line item. So as a sample, I'm going to say we're purchasing chocolate croissants. I'm going to input the quantity here and then the price. In addition, you'll be asked to add the supplier part number if applicable. So if you have a specific number for that item, please enter it here. The unit of measure, I'm going to input each. The unit of measure has to be selected from this dropdown and cannot be a type in value. So please make sure that you're selecting from the list here. Perfect. So now I'm going to go ahead and submit the tax exactly like how I had done on the PO level. I'm going to add the tax reference here. Perfect. So before proceeding, I'm going to calculate to see what my totals are going to be. So here you'll see that I have a gross total of over 200K. In addition, I'd like to call out that you can leave a supplier note here when you're submitting the invoice if there's some information you'd like to point out to the requester you're sending this invoice to. When I click submit here, I'll get that same error message. So I'm going to continue and select send invoice here. You'll see here that I'm going to get an error message. This is because for compliant invoices, the payment term has to be there. This value is going to default based on your terms with RBI, but in my dummy account, I don't have any defaulted terms with my dummy account. But this field is something that will automatically default here. For the purpose of this demo, I'm just going to select a value, and then now I'm going to hit submit. Send invoice. Perfect. So this is what I wanted to show you. So as you'll get an error warning here saying that as per RBI policy, a PO is required for any invoice more than 5,000 USD and 1,000 USD for marketing orders. It's prompting you here to say that this is a non-PO backed invoice and it's more than the threshold and it may not be approved by RBI. You can continue to submit or you can continue editing. Here I'd say definitely do not submit because any invoices that are not backed by a PO above 5,000 will get rejected by the RBI team. In addition, if there's any change to this threshold here, so if at a later date RBI were to change this threshold to 10,000 or 8,000, for example, you'd get the same following warning. So RBI will continue to provide you with the latest policy information before you submit your invoice as to not delay the invoice processing. Perfect. So to submit this invoice and non-PO backed, I'm going to have to make sure that it's under the 5,000 range. So I'm going to recalculate now. You'll see my new amount is under the 5,000, so it'll let me go ahead and submit. Perfect. So similar to the previous invoice we created, you'll see I've been redirected to the Invoices tab, where I can see that my old invoice is now in the pending approval status, which is the second status after processing. In addition, since it's a non-PO backed invoice, I'll see here that there's no PO number associated. In addition, I'll see that prompt message that appeared when I was trying to submit the invoice here. That invoice is greater than 5,000 should have a PO. Perfect. The last documentation I'm going to demo to you is going to be creating the credit note. The process of creating a credit note is similar to that of creating an invoice with a few minor differences. Once again, in the Invoice tab, I'm going to hover and click Create Credit Note. If the credit note is issued to resolve an issue seen in an existing invoice, please select Resolve Issue for Invoice Number, and then select the associated invoice from the drop-down here. So I'm going to select the invoice that we had just created. If you are issuing a credit note purely to offer credit to RBI, you would select Other here. For the purpose of today's demo, I'm just going to select Resolve Issue for Invoice Number and select the invoice that it's applicable. Then I'm going to hit Continue. Then it'll ask me, how do I want to correct the invoice that I had created? Do I want to credit note the full amount and completely cancel the invoice, or do I just want to adjust a partial amount of the credit note? Here you'll have information, and whenever you hover over it, whenever you see any of these eyes throughout the Coupa Supplier Portal, if you hover over it, you'll get a more detailed explanation of the feature and functionality here. So when I go into Adjust Invoice with a credit note, this is if I just want to change the quantity or price and reduce it through a partial credit note. As I mentioned earlier, the first one of completely canceling is if the full invoice quantity and price is incorrect and you just want to cancel that off. For the purpose of this demo, I'm going to select Adjust Invoice with Credit Note and hit Create. Perfect. So now you'll see I'm in the credit note form over here. I'll have to enter all the required fields indicated by the red asterisks, similar to when I was creating the invoice. As you'll see, it's all similar. Instead of invoice number, it requests the credit note number. So I'm going to type in credit note 2. I'm going to type in credit note 2 over here. Well, you can see credit note 2 has already been used, so it'll give me an error. So I'm going to use credit note 3. The one difference that I'd like to call out here is that here you'll see that the price or quantity will be negative. So when you're doing a credit note and you want to do a return on either the quantity or price level, it will have to be a negative value to negate the positive value of the invoice. Similar to the non-PO backed invoice, you'll also see here that I have the option to negate either at the price level or the quantity level. And with the invoice, I could either add a line item at the quantity or the price level. So I'm going to proceed, let's say, by negating, so the full amount was 19. So I'm just going to negate, let's say, there was the need to negate 5 out of the total amount. And then with the quantity, I had -5, so I'm going to negate only 2 of the quantities, for example. And please make sure, similar to the invoice, to hit calculate before submitting. This will tell me like the new total of the amount that I had negated. So for here, it will be like the 3 remaining. And then out of the 5 that I had removed, it'll be 25 from the full order. So now once I hit submit on the credit note, I'll get that same error message that I was getting for the invoices, is that to make sure that I'm not attaching a credit note to this transaction. And then I'm going to hit send credit note. Now you'll see the credit note that I had just created is over here. And if we go into PO69 that I had originally, you can see that the full amount was 365 and I submitted a negative quantity of 28. against that amount. Perfect. So that concludes the demo portion of this training session. For the next piece that I want to touch on the support resources that are available to you. There's 3 different ways to access support help on the Coupa Supplier Portal. The first way is from a technical side. If I'm facing any technical issues, I can chat with the Coupa support here. Here with the chat report representative, I'll select which issue I'm facing. So for example, if I'm having trouble sending an invoice through, I'll select invoice and now I'll hit start chat. It'll connect me to a representative. Once I'm in queue to get started with a representative, I'll be assigned. So here I've been assigned Vivin, so I can type in my message and ask any question, and they will be able to help me. In addition to the chat support, there's 2 other methods of getting help on the Coupa Supplier Portal. Next to my name here on the top right, I'll see the help button. Here I can click online help. Once I click online help, I'll be navigated to the Coupa Suppliers help page. Here you have access to multiple resources on the basic features of the Coupa Supplier Portal. For example, if I want help with getting set up on Coupa for the first time, it'll provide all of the details here, creating a password, finishing the setup of the account. In addition, another help feature we have here is if I hover to the help as well, if I click help tour, it'll trigger these live demos of each tab that I'm in. So for example, now I'm in the orders page, it'll give me quick tidbits and information about this page. Once I've read everything, I can hit got it. For example, if I go to the home page and I click help and I click help tour, it'll give me a help tour of the home page. So all of the features available to me on the home page. If you have functional questions, you can address functional questions that are more related to the RBI business process with the supplier enablement mailbox. Now I'm going to move back into the slide that I was presenting to go over some of the next steps. Please bear with me as I share my previous screen.